Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Maraming salamat na nandito pa rin kayo kahit inaantok na yata. At pinapasalamat ko ng lubos ang ICW at ang mga panelists para sa magandang pakakataon ito na pwede kong sundin sa live stream ang mga lahat ng talakayan ng pahalihan ito. Isang konsepto na paulit-ulit kong narinig kahapon ay ang positionality ng autor. At napaka-importante yata ito para sa aking talumpati. Parang what am I doing here? A Swiss writer in a workshop on Philippine literature. At gusto ko muna banggitin ang poetics essay ni Napoleon Arcellano III at ang sinulat niya, laging merong mas sentro pa sa sentro. At hinuhula tila ni Sir June Cruz Reyes na gusto raw ipain ni Nap Arcelles itong sentro ng panitikan. At dito sa Zurich, sa Switzerland, sa gitna ng Europa, napaka-importante din, lalo na sa aking itong tanong na kung nasaan ba ang sentro, nasaan ba ang mga libis, at isa ba lang ang sentro o ilan ba ang umiiral. At narinig nung inimbitahan o si Bowman, sinabi niya Filipino sana ako. At pumapayag naman ako, pero kung minsan mag-i-English rin ako kasi kung minsan hindi talaga sapat ang aking Filipino. Ayan, itong sinabi na, itong nobela, Tiefenlager, na medyo masalimuot yata ang paksa. Tungkol sa anong bagay, mahirap sabihin kasi maraming paksa at lalo halo-halo at mukhang dapat ganun. Ang damdamin ko, kasi parang hindi ako ang pumili ng paksa, sa halip ay ang kwento ay lumapit sa akin, kaya pinili ako ng kwento. Natulala ako sa umpisa noong November 2014 na sa isang kuweba ako kasama ng mga kasapi ng aking grupo ng isang grupo ng Union. At pumasok kami sa kuweba na yan sa isang bundok sa kanluran ng Switzerland. Jurassic Mountain Range ang tinatawag doon, Jura sa amin. At sa isang banda doon, may patong-pato na hilera ng lupa o kayang petrified na buhangin ng sinaunang dagat. At hindi ko nahanap ang Filipino ng Opalinus clay. Kayo mag-i-English ako muna. Opalinus clay is a deep layer of clay, as the name says, in the Jurassic Mountains. And it is the latest and most promising candidate to build depositories for nuclear waste. Because the radiation, as you know, of this nuclear waste is very dangerous for many, many years. It is stated in the German and in the Swiss law on nuclear waste that depositories have to be built that should remain safe for 1 million years. Now, this is quite crazy if you think of how long humanity has had a writing system, for example, and then to imagine how long 1 million year is. So in November 2014, I was still working as a trade union officer for the major trade union of public employees in Switzerland. So I was working with hospitals, CBA negotiations, and my favorite work was actually with the janitors of public schools. And one of these janitors of the board of the section that I was working for, one of these janitors was sort of a mineral nerd. He was collecting stones. And for the social outing of this union group, he wanted to visit rock laboratory in Monterrey in the Jurassic Mountains. It's run by the Swiss government, and European, American, and Japanese researchers test equipment for future depositories of nuclear waste. Now, as we were there, we were guided by a representative of the consortium of the energy industry of Switzerland. So the companies running nuclear power plants in our country. And it was this representative of the industry who told us that the technical problems of the depository have been solved. He was very optimistic that they would build a safe site, an excellent site actually. Another problem, however, needed to be investigated, he said. And this was the problem of memory, the problem of passing on knowledge over time. How can we make sure that people who live in 10,000 or 100,000 or 1 million years still know about the danger of this nuclear waste and what's in that depository? And actually, to my disbelief, this representative of the industry mentioned this idea that maybe we should found a monastery, that maybe monasteries, both in Christianity and Buddhism, had shown to be the most stable institution to pass on knowledge over time. So maybe we needed a sort of nuclear waste monastery. At doon talaga pinili ako ng kwento. Sinalukob ako ng guni-guni na ito. Hindi ko sigurado agad doon sa kuweba kung tama ba ang narinig ko. Pero hinahanap ko sa kasaysayan ng talakayan tungkol sa basurang nuklear, natanto ko na paulit-ulit na sumisikat itong ideya ng monasteryo. At nagmumula ito sa mga siyentifikong usapan, hindi lang basta-bastang usapin. At nananatili sa akin ang kwento noong 2015, noong tumigil akong magtrabaho sa Union para maging isang freelance writer. At kung minsan, naramdaman ko itong monastic order para sa pamamahala sa basurang nuklear ay parang isang mana yating o baka isang kulam ng dating kong mga kasama sa Union kasi hindi natuwa sila na umalis ako noon. Noong sa umpisa ng aking trabaho bilang freelance writer, palagi nag-iisa ako sa bahay na lumalaki at lumalawak sa aking kamalayan ang isang bagong grupo ng 5 tao. At talagang itinataguyod nila ang monasteryo. Hindi naman ako natakot sa kanila. Gusto ko yata sumama, kaya sinulat ko itong nobela ng kanilang order. Kaya tungkol sa anong bagay ba itong nobela? Tungkol sa isang maliit na grupo ng tao galing sa iba't ibang lugar ng mundo, pareho ng bawat ospital, bawat paaralan o pabrika sa aking bansa. At medyo karaniwan din ang kanilang karanasan na imposible talaga ang tungkulin. Pero sinusubukan pa rin nila mahanap pang paraan. At mahirap ipaliwanag kung bakit, pero meron pa rin silang pag-asa. At tungkol sa makakaibigan din ang aking nobela. Kasi sa umpisa, nakita-kita ulit ang 2 makaibigan. Yun, isa sa taga Maynila, isa taga Switzerland. isa itong nagtatrabaho silang dalawa sa Hong Kong. Si Betty Wang naman ang nurse na Chinoy na caregiver at si Petra naman accountant, specialist ng old age insurance na naging consultant. 25 taon na hindi sila nakita-kita, maraming kwento siguro, at natanto nilang dalawa, gusto nilang baguhin ang buhay nila. Kasi walang asawa, hindi ganun kamasaya sila sa kanilang trabaho, at kaya gusto nilang mag-umpisa ng bagong kabanata, isang proyekto mahalaga na may talagang saysay. Kaya inumpisahan nila ang monasteryo para sa pamamahala ng basurang nuklear sa Switzerland muna hanggang naging pandaigdigang order ang proyekto nila. At I'm sure you realize this is not a very realistic novel. It is like a play. It is or a game. Naglalaro ako sa itong ideya o sa itong guni-guni ng monasterya para sa pamamahala ng basurang nuklear. Parang isinasalaysay ko ang unang 2 taon ng order. At dahil mahilig ang mga kasapi ng order sa makwentuhan, pwede kong isingit sa gitna ng nobela ang mga sci-fi stories na iniimbento nila habang nag-iinuman sa halamanan ng monasteryo. So parang yon ang talagang fun. Kahit isang sci-fi story na mas parang how do you say that? Utopian, pero ang iba mas black dystopian. At kung nananagalog ako at kung ginagamit ko halimbawa itong salitang basurang nuklear na inaala ko agad isang awit na noong 90s narinig ko, isang awit yata ni Susan Fernandez na doon ang line, itigil ang karerang nuklear, itigil ang karerang nuklear, iparinig sa buong daigdig ang awit ng bukas. Yun lang ang inaalala ko. At na-realize ko kung nananagalog ako, iba ang mga inaalala ko tungkol sa paksa ng mga bagay na nuklear. Bigla nandyan ang Bataan Nuclear Power Plant at yung mga talakayan dati tungkol sa ganitong proyekto. Ibig sabihin, mahalaga at talagang importante ang lingwahe. At tungkol sa wika mismo ang aking nobela. Kasi tungkol sa mga maraming wika ng mundo. Halimbawa, paano isusulat ng mga makakasama sa order? Paano isusulat nila ang masamang balita ng basurang nuklear? Paano uunlad ang mga wika ng mundo? Ingles pa palagi ang pinakaunang wika o magiging sulat na pandaigdig pa ang mga Chinese characters. Magiging universal code pa ang lengguwahe ng isang computer program. Dapat bang maunawaan natin kung sino ang magtatagumpay sa mga digmaan ng kinabukasan? O dapat bang maunawaan kung paano maghalo-halo ang mga wika sa mga malalaking lungsod ng mundo? Halimbawa sa Maynila. Dapat pang maintindihan ang kalakaran ng mga di sinadyang pagsasama-sama at paghahalo-halo ng mga wika galing sa iba't ibang lugar ng mundo at galing sa iba't ibang sulok ng isang lipunan. Pero sa totoo lang, mas simple rin itong tanong. Mas simple at mas mahirap. Kung sa nobela man o sa buhay ko. itong mas simple at mas mahirap na tanong ay naiintindihan ba natin ang isa't isa? Naiintindihan ba natin kung anong nangyayari ngayon? Kung anong pwede mangyayari sa mundo? At lalo na sa panahon nito ng pandemya, kahit mas mapapayapa ang Switzerland kaysa Pilipinas, maraming problema o maraming na hindi naintindihan. Kung halimbawa sa tanong ng bakuna, na kung mabuti ba o hindi. At parang imposible kung minsan ang naiintindihan ang isa't isa sa mga paksa na ito at sa mas personal pa. So kaya anong dapat gawin kung kulang ang kaalaman at pagkaunawa? Pero dapat pa rin bilisan ang pakilos. At dito rin, isang karaniwang karanasan na lalo na sa akin, sa lahat ng mga lugar ng trabaho na nakita ko, parang kung pigang-piga na tayo sa gitna ng kairaming dapat gawin, pero hindi kaya. Paano lang? At hindi talaga nabibigay ng sagot ang aking nobela sa tanong na ito. Pero sinusundan ko ang mga hakbang ng mga kasapi ng order at ng kanilang kwentuhan sa kanilang iniimbento na sci-fi stories at ang kanilang mga pagsusubok ng mga maaring solusyon. Hindi ko sinasabi na magtatagumpay na sila. Ibig sabihin, tungkol sa isang hangarin din ang aking nobela. Tungkol sa hangarin sa isang maginhawa at masaganang buhay na hindi tungkol sa pagpapayaman, pero sapat na ang oras para mag-aral, para magnilay-nilay at magkwentuhan. At gustong-gusto ko kaninang umaga ang sinabi ni Sir Butch Talisay tungkol sa kasayahan, na importante rin ang kasayahan. At parang sa isip ko at pumasok din ito sa nobela na ito, na parang gusto ko mahanap ang mga buto ng kasayahan sa kasalukuyan na baka mabubulaklak sa kinabukasan. At sa personal talaga, gusto kong parang para sa akin talaga, ang pinakamasaya ako kung pwede akong mag-aral ng bagong wika, o kung pwede akong maklase o magtandem sa ibang tao, at parang teacher's pet talaga ang paboritong papel ko sa buhay. Yun. Anong oras na? Oo. Marami, short lang, yung anong ginagawa ko para isinalarawan si Betty Wang, ang aking Filipino character sa nobela. Parang bida talaga siya. At lumaki siya sa Maynila, taga-China ang tatay niya, at may-ari siya ng isang vulcanizing shop. Medyo mahirap ang relasyon ni Betty Wang sa tatay niya. Nag-away-away sila palagi. Palasuway yata si Betty Wang. At ayaw ang tatay na naging tomboy siya. At kaya run away siya noong parang 17 years na taong. Umalis siya sa tahanan ng pamilya at nanatili siya sa bahay ng isang guro. Na itong guro dating aktivista. At ganun, sa ganitong paraan, pumasok si Betty Wang sa isang eksena o sa isang parang social circle, quite a cosmopolitan circle of students, NGO workers, etc. in Quezon City, early 90s. And as you realize, this is sort of my own, this is the the little bit of the Philippines that I experienced when I was a student from 92, 93, 94 at UP Diliman, CSWCD. And I experienced UP and the whole part of Quezon City as quite a cosmopolitan place with a lot of foreign students, mostly from other Asian countries, Vietnam, Nepal, etc. And a place where a lot of hope was felt because the Cold War had just finished. And the really big problems had started, but were not as clear yet. So actually, Betty Wang is then naging nurse siya at matagal nagtrabaho sa isang malaking ospital bago pumunta sa Hong Kong. Sa order para sa pamamahala ng basurang nuklear, nagiging medika naman siya. Ibig sabihin, responsable siya ng kalusugan ng mga kasapi at marunong din siya sa pag-aral ng mga panganib ng basurang nuklear. Dalubhasa pa rin siya ng kalusugan ng utak. Ibig sabihin ng mga medical na tanong tungkol sa pag-ala-ala. Kasi sa Hong Kong, nagtatrabaho siya bilang caregiver ng isang matandang lalaki ng nag-uulayanin. At kaya may Alzheimer siya. So doon ang problema ng Alzheimer na malapit sa kanya. At sa nobela, hindi dire-diretso ko isinalaysay ang talambuhay ni Betty Wang. At bakit? And this is related to a concept that I have to name in English because it is a very, I don't know, maybe it's a very European, US discussion. I'm very curious to know what you think. It's this discussion on cultural appropriation, which I actually think is a very valid discussion. The question of who is legitimate to actually write about whose life, like, is it appropriation if me as a Swiss writer, if I'm sort of including and or fleshing out, inventing the life of a Filipino or a Filipino character. And maybe in the discussion we can go on more about this, but on a short note, it was very important for me to actually do quite a lot of research when I had this idea of this character. So I was lucky to get a grant to spend 4 weeks in Hong Kong in January, where you had a lot of free days because of the Chinese New Year. So I was able to spend a lot of time in the Central District sa mga kampuhan ng mga domestic workers taga Pilipinas at pwede kong kwentuhan sa maraming tao doon, lalo na sa mga pila sa harap ng mga simbahan kasi dapat pumila ng 1 oras para makaupo sa loob ng simbahan at 10 misa sa isang linggo sa St. Joseph's lang. So maraming oras na ako para kwentuhan. At maganda talaga itong kwenta sa mga pila kasi hindi interview. Kung nag-interview ako sa pamamagitan ng isang NGO, lalo na ang parang what I got to hear was really the Bagong Bayani story. At yung ay malungkot at dapat matyaga, dapat magtiis at the whole analysis of the kahirapan itong migration policy. And I mean, I agree with a lot of the criticism, but for the literary purpose I had, it was actually important to break out of those a little bit prefabricated narratives. So I was very happy to also meet the president of the Philippine Nurses Association in Hong Kong. I found her through Facebook, and it turned out pala mahilig din siya magsulat. At kaya about 3 times we had dinner to discuss about writing and about her experience. And I mean, she was a really extreme example because she was she had a diploma as a nurse, and in Hong Kong she was employed to care for a dog because it's very fashionable now to have these flushy big dogs that have to be shampooed every day. So yes, and maybe my last line on this cultural appropriation question is that for me it is extremely important to have a critical assessment of the colonial narratives that we inherit as German writers, as writers of the German language. Like that there are a lot of murky traditions that we might not be aware of, that we have to analyze in order to somehow come out of it. On the other hand, to say that like you should restrict yourself to your own social group would mean that I have to totally misrepresent the society I'm living in, because like in Switzerland, 25% of the population don't hold a Swiss passport, and more than half have some kind of migration story in their family. So like in hospitals, especially in the places that I've seen in my work, it was always a totally mixed crowd who worked there together. So for me, it was extremely important to, in this novel, that there would be a janitor, yung mga kasama ko sa Union, at that somebody who came from far away, like Betty Wang. And the Philippines is the parang sa tabi ng Switzerland, the country I feel to know best. And so it was clear that it would be a Filipino character. Yun. So how am I in the time? Baka papasok na si Boss Bomen o si Kuya Bomen kasi si Bomen naman isa sa pinakamasarap kong kausap mula sa noong 2012 na parang I was working on a novel tungkol sa pagsasalin ni Rizal ng William Tell ni Schiller mula German sa Tagalog. Yun ang paksa ko. At alam ninyo naman, ang talagang pinakamahusay na talubhasa dyan, si Bomen. At kaya, pwede ba tayo makwentuhan ngayon?
Salamat sa iyong napakagandang sharing, Annette, no? At tuwan-tuwa ako, no? Nagpapasalamat ang lahat sa iyong napakagandang lecture ngayon. Tuwan-tuwa rin sila sa iyong pagsalita sa Filipino. At yun nga, so ang ating gagawin ngayon ay konting talakayan, no? Ito yung iyong nobela, no? So, Ethan Laga, nandito sa akin, at maganda rin yung kanyang dedication na sa aliman nga lang, ano. At meron akong ilang mga komento tungkol sa novela na pwedeng siguro pagsimulan ng mga tanong, ano. So maaaring mamaya ay may mga magtanong tungkol sa iyong lecture at tungkol sa iyong nobela. At sa kabuluhan nito, sa maaaring kabuluhan sa Pilipinas. So sa katunayan, syempre mahirap, konti pa lang nakapagbasa nito dahil ito nasa German. Hindi ko lang alam kung may naisalin na ito sa iba pang mga wikang Europeo katulad ng French, katulad ng iyong nobela, Wilhelm Tell in Manila, no? Na talagang nanalo pa ng premyo ang yung salin, no, sa French ng iyong nobela. Sana ito ay mangyari din dito sa Tiefenlager, dahil ito rin ay may universal na kabuluhan. may kinalaman nga sa usapin nga ng atomic waste, ano, na ito ay pangmatagalan na problema na hindi lamang isang bansa ang usapin kundi global ang usapin ng basurang mga basurang nuklear, ano. So may mga ilang komento ko sa iyong nobela, ano. At sa katunayan ay mabilis ko lang nabasa, no, at kakatapos ko lamang. At ito yung aking ilang mga komento sa iyong nobela. Unang-una ay maganda yung iyong kwento tungkol sa mga monastery, ano? Mga monastery bilang batayan ng pagpapatuloy ng knowledge o kaalaman sa mga generations, ano? Iba't ibang generations. Yung sa Alemag na tawag na Kloster, ano? Yung tanong ko lang ay bakit, although nabanggit mo nga na ito ay bunga ng isang talakayan, ano, na may nagbanggit na isang concern sa nuclear waste, na nabanggit na may yung mga monastery, sila yung may kakayahang mag-preserve ng knowledge through generations. Ang isang tanong ko, although this might be easy to answer, no? Bakit monastery o kloster ang ginamit mong halimbawa? Bakit hindi guild, ano? O Zunft sa German, ano? Zunft. Yung mga guild kasi sa Europa, sila yung nagpapatuloy ng kaalaman, nagpapasa-pasa ng kaalaman tungkol sa crafts, no? Kumbaga, kung ang preservasyon ng kung ang pagpreserba ng kaalaman tungkol sa pagtanggol ng tao tungkol sa nuclear waste, kung paano tutugon ng tao sa problema ng nuclear waste ay intergenerational, bakit hindi Zunft o guild ang modela? In fact, ang Zunft ay masasabi pa natin kumpara sa kloster o monastery. Kumbaga, kung ang kloster, ang kanilang ginagamit na lingwahe ay Latin, ano? O universal na lingwahe, ang mga Zunft, ano, lalo na sa panahon na ang Europa ay hindi pa nagkaroon ng mga nation states, ang mga Zunft ay matatawag natin tunay na cosmopolitan. Ibig sabihin, ang mga gustong matuto ng mga kaalaman ay maaaring maglakbay, ano, kung paano gumawa ng mga produkto, ng mga halimbawa, mga damit, mga o iba pang metal, ano, ay maaaring maglakbay sa iba't ibang bahagi ng Europa at matuto ng mga skills, ano. Kumbaga, kung usapin ng panglinguistikang cosmopolitanismo, ay ang Zunft ay alam natin yung mga ano, di ba? Alam mo yun, Annette, no? Yung mga gusto mag-train sa ilalim ng Zunft ay maaaring maglakbay bahagi ng Europa para makauwi ng kakayahan. Ibig sabihin, kailangan nila matuto ng iba't ibang mga lingwahe. Ibig sabihin, yung cosmopolitanismo ng wika na nais mong ilarawan sa iyong nobela ay maaaring mas nababagay sa Zunft kaysa sa kloster, ano? Kung usapin lamang na ito, ano? Kaya yun yung isang tanong ko, bakit kloster ang ginamit mo imbes na Zunft o guild bilang halimbawa ng iyong kaalaman na nagpapasa-pasa, ano, sa mga henerasyon, no? At itong cosmopolitanismo na iyong nobela ay napakahalaga. Matutuwa ang mga nagbabasang Pilipino sa iyong nobela dahil ang dami-dami mga Tagalog ng mga salita dito, ano. Yung isang napaka-importanteng character, ang tawag sa kanya ate, ano. Sabihin nito ay talagang napaka-sentral yung ate bilang isang kategorya sa iyong nobela. Siya yung parang leader nung monarchy. Bagamat hindi siya Pilipina, ano? Si Betty Wang ang Filipina. So, tingin ko ang pinakamahalagang inaambag ng iyong nobela ay yung kung paano para tumugon sa isang pandaibigang problema, sa isang global na usapin katulad ng nuclear waste, ay kinakailangan natin ng cosmopolitan na pamamaraan ng pagdito. Kung saan nagtatagpo-tagpo ang iba't ibang mga bansa, iba't ibang mga wika, ano? Kaya lalo na sa dulo ng iyong nobela ay nandun nagkakahalo-halo ng iba't ibang mga lingwahe at pati Chinese, ano. Of course, Annette, began to learn Chinese in just a few years ago, ano, and that she's now quite good at it, no? So nakakainggit dito sa ganito, ano, na Chinese characters. Of course, I can identify the Chinese characters now, ano. Maganda yung pag-meld ng iba't ibang mga para maigiit yung cosmopolitan problem. Na yung mga problema natin ngayon ay mga global na issue. At kung makita natin din sa mga review, ano, this is considered sa isang website o sa isang program na Swiss, one of the 52 best novels of this year, right? That means it's one of the best novels of every week of the year. Ano? So it's considered one of the best novels of the year. Ano? Sa Switzerland, ano? And ang problema lang hindi natin mabasa ito sa ating wikang maintindihan pa natin, no? Pero ito ay nagtataglay ng cosmopolitanismo, ano? At particular yung Chinese and very central Filipino contribution to this cosmopolitan world, ano? So hindi ito nasa English, ito nasa German. But it's a Swiss German, also quite very Swiss German also, ano. And so ito yung aking mga katanungan lang tungkol dito. Maliban ito yung huli kong tanong, bakit hindi mo naiisip na bakit napaka-analog ng iyong konsepto ng pagpapasa-pasa ng kaalaman? Kumbaga sa pamamagitan ng pasa-pasa ng crafts, no? Very, very analog. This is a very analog novel, no? Kumbaga, kung isipin ng iba ang matatag na pamamaraan ng pagpapasa-pasa ng kaalaman ay digital. That's why we're digitizing everything, no? We're trying to digitize everything to preserve knowledge, no? Whereas this book actually goes against that idea that it's not the digital that will save us, but the analog, no? The analog knowledge, analog practices of the monastery will save us. No? It's not the digital preservation of knowledge, no? So that's one thing that it's actually rather pre-internet. Sorry, kasi magka-generation tayo, Annette, no? It's actually pre-internet in that it seems to, rely on the very pre-analog concept of passing down knowledge through generations. Ibig sabihin, through either the kloster, the monastery, or the Zunft, ay magpapasa yung kaalaman na ito. Dito naalala ko, kung may konti pang time, ang mga French, how the French try to store French literature, yung Bibliothèque Nationale sa France. Ang ginagawa nila, they don't store French literature in digital format. They store it on titanium discs, wherein the letters are burned microscopically onto the discs. No? So you can actually, using a electron microscope, you can read the titanium discs and see the letters there. And then you can read for example, Descartes or Leibniz. You can read them, or mga other French works. You can read them on the titanium discs using a electron microscope. No? So ito ay parang parang hindi digital knowledge. It's not stored as 010101, but it's stored as actual letters burned on titanium discs and buried under mountains. So it's a kind of analog knowledge that they want to preserve. So yun yung nakita ko rin na usapin dito, na it doesn't seem to be it seems to rely on analog knowledge, on human practice and training and learning to pass on knowledge from generation to generation. Tapos yung dulo ng iyong novela ay parang talagang explosion of languages at iba't ibang mga salita, papunta na sila sa desierto, doon sa dulo na ito, kung saan nila ilalagak yung mga nuclear waste, sa desierto, sa ilalim ng desierto. So, yun lang yung ilang mga katanungan ko, at sana ay mabigyang tugon nito ni Annette. Inaasahan natin may mga tanungan, no, mula sa ating mga tagapakinig din ngayong hapon.
Oo. Ay, maraming salamat, Bowman, sa pagbabasa mo at para sa lahat ng mga comments dito. At doon sa analog digital, hindi sangayon ako kasi napaka mahusay din sa mga digital na technologies ang mga kasapi ng order ito. Diba? Merong isa na galing sa Russia, isang Russian nuclear scientist na nagtatrabaho sa Geneva sa mga NGOs. At siya binuo niya ang tinatawag ko simulatorium na parang talagang digital simulation of the sort of kind of a 3D virtual reality simulations of the dangers that could happen to the monastery. So that is a very, very important part of their work of memory. And I mean, there in the utopias, dystopias, ideas come in of how to, I mean, these are also ideas that I've taken from the scientific literature, which is quite enchanting or a bit frightening on this issue. But anyway, there is this idea, for example, to write this information into the DNA of animals, of cockroaches, most possibly because they will survive everybody. But some high civilization could then retrace the information that is written into the DNA. Or things like that. So that's even going beyond virtual, basically. But I think tama ka dyan na sa tingin ko napaka-importante ang analog kasi hindi ang makina mismo ang gagawin ito. The machines will not do it for us. So there will always, I strongly believe that there will always have to be people who run the machines, and people who actually can invent new machines, and people who can turn off a machine if it's going out of order. And so therefore you need very intelligent people who actually hone their own crafts and their knowledge, aside from the machines. And there it's yung tanong tungkol sa mga guild naman o monasteryo. Actually, everything you mentioned about the cosmopolitanism of the guilds, I think is also present in the early history of monastic order. Like here, maybe I have to say that Switzerland was Christianized twice. First by the Roman Empire, the soldiers, but that was restricted mainly to the Roman colonies. When the Roman Empire broke down, not just Christianity disappeared, but also the alphabet was practically lost. Like literacy was back to zero for a number of centuries. And the ones who reintroduced the writing together with Christianity were Irish wandering monks. At parang they were not nationalist at all. They were really all around, and they had a sort of not a cosmopolitan, but a European vision of the landscape. And so I think there is a universal concept in the monastic tradition. At importante naman kasi baka dapat kong sabihin na hindi matasalin na tao ako, pero napaka-interested ako sa monasteryo bilang institusyon. At parang noong sinabi ko tungkol sa hangarin ko, ang hangarin ng isang magandang buhay, ng isang masaganang buhay. At meron ito sa konsepto ng monasteryo para sa akin. Parang isinasalarawan ko ang isang parang makatang taon at makulay na pang-araw-araw na kalakaran. Pareho ng taon ng simbahan o talagang monasteryo. Pero pinuo itong taon mula sa mga paborito kong tula at awit. Yun ang last chapter. At mula sa mga kwento ng aksidente ng mga karerang nuklear na dapat talaga maalala at matandaan. Baka pumapasok din talaga isang religious idea na talagang ang kapihasnan at tungkulin ng pag-alaala sa bawat tao at sa bawat kamatayan. At ito wala sa guilt. Itong parang philosophical man o spiritual core ng at actually, I mean, just as I talk, when I came to the Philippines in 91, it's the last people I wanted to mingle with were missionaries. So because I was very critical of the missionary tradition of Europe. So like I came from the Solidarity movement. So of course we were critical there. But then I realized that I met people who were missionaries, and especially because when I, in 2014, also had to improve my Tagalog, and I was kulang talaga sa tingin ko ang mga mahusay na eskwelahan para sa pag-aaral ng Filipino, at dapat kong talaga pilihin isang eskwelahan para sa mga missionary. At kasi doon ang pwede mong mag-aral ng mas malalim na Tagalog. And some of them are, they're somehow a bit of a mystery to me, that some of even the people, where do they take their commitment from? That is totally independent of fashions, of philosophical faiths, of things. But that's maybe a remark on the side. What really interested me in terms of monasteries or orders is that I realized that there are similarities in the socio-economic history of orders. If you see the Chinese history of the Shaolin monasteries and the Benedictine and Franciscan Dominican orders in Europe. Like this, you try to set yourself apart from the world and from the powers of the world, and have your own world in a way while still being in this world. But then it's usually the first generation, totally idealistic, they set this up, and in the second or third generation they will be corrupt, or they get entangled with the economic structures, etc. So, and pareho ito sa Europe man o sa China. Yun ang that interested me, this to look at the monastery not as so much as a religious institution, but as a kind of institution that tries to build a power separate from the state and from the economic powers that be. Hindi ko alam kung sagot ito sa tanong mo. At isang maliit na tanong na nakikita ko sa chat na talagang bother ko. Kasi bakit hindi Ong ang pangalan ni Betty? Kasi talagang taga-Fujian ang kanyang tatay, at alam ko na sa Fujian Huao, Hokkien man, ang Wang ay Ong. Pero kasi ang aking Tai Chi teacher sa Shanghai noong 2019, 2 months ako sa Shanghai, pangalan niya Wang. At ang pinakakaraniwang pangalan sa mainland China ang Wang. So kaya pinili ko dyan. At and then I really thought, do I have to change it very on the last stretch? But actually, this Betty Wang, she has this very complicated relationship to her father. And it's when he dies that she is overwhelmed by guilt because she has not made up she hasn't come to peace with him. And she develops this almost craze for anything Chinese after he has died. But she actually knows very little of China. She hasn't been there. She hasn't. And what she really loved about China were the early films of sort of kung fu movies from Hong Kong, the Jackie Chan or Jet Li in the early 90s. At tagahanga ako rin dyan. So parang it was, she actually lives in a sort of imaginary China that she also searches when she goes to Hong Kong, and she of course doesn't find it. But but by actually learning Mandarin, and which she hated as a child. She hated the Mandarin school for the Chinoy children in Manila. But when she relearns Mandarin, she sort of invents her own version of a Shaolin Taoism, etc., that is later on passed into this idea of the monastery also. So there, I thought it's okay if it's Wang and not Ong, to give a long answer to a short question. Hindi ako na marinig.
Basahin ko lang itong messages na nakuha natin.
Oo.
Sabi ni Butch Dalisay ay mabuhay at salamat, Annette. Sabi ni nung isang fellow natin, si Eric Tingol, salamat po, Annette. Si Luna Sikatleto, salamat din. Sabi niya. Si Marianne Moll, sabi niya, I'm so intrigued by this. At may mga gusto magtanong. Pero bago noon ay mayroong iba pang comments tungkol galing sa FB. Sabi, saan ba makakuha ng kopya? Tapos, syempre yung comments ko sa Ong at sa Kawang, nandito rin. At sabi ni Ron B. Pingol, very interesting topic. Good evening po. At si Miss Pipay Warren, isa sa ating mga fellows, she has a comment or a question. Siguro pwedeng live niyang tanungin ang kanyang question. Hi. Pipay, pwede mong tanungin ng...
Hi. So, may tanong lang ako sa proseso ninyo. Just a very quick question. Because I noticed that you're dealing with a lot of rich topics in your novel. So on the one hand, you have the science related with regard to the nuclear waste. Then I'm sure the language that you brought up about the monastic is also something that you would draw rich material from. And then you also have, of course, the emotional narrative of the novel. And I was thinking that if you're drawing from so many wells to speak, with regard to putting your story together, do you have a certain strategy for maybe trying to connect the scientific with what we might understand to be on the maybe not hard religious, but something to do with the monastic? So you have all of these separate elements together. Is there a way that you try to connect them? Do you let them stand on their own? Is there a certain extent that you make sure that they're all connected? And if you do have a system for it, or you feel like you succeeded in doing it, I'm sure you have, but the novel's not in English, and we wish it was. Hope we can read it when an English version comes to us. But do you have a favorite instance in your novel of how you were able to maybe bring all of these disciplines together? That's my question.
Maybe it's not a system, but it's one thing I learned, because this is my fourth novel. And I must say I have two novels that failed, that never saw the light of day, because I actually failed on actually the things, because I often have too complicated ideas. But this time I thought it's somehow I managed to do it. Otherwise I would not have published. So, but anyway, it's it's more a practice. I realized that I have to really stomach, or I have to digest the material. It cannot be too quick from research to writing. Like sometimes it takes 1 or 2 years between the research. I take tons of notes, excerpts, I draw a lot, and I have to really here, like I had to review my nuclear physics from high school. I did for some months, every morning I did 1 hour of math in the morning to be able to read the scientific material. And then I realized I have this tension. I want to write Agad because I'm actually enthusiastic about the thing, but I know it's too early. If I write now, it will be explanatory, didactic, etc. So here, what I did, I did like in between layers. For example, I wrote a diary of Petra because I did a lot of work when I was in the country, and I had a lot of observations about nature, and I realized how my perception of nature changed, even of a simple rain or anything, how that changed by this reading on nuclear issues. So these experiences of being in the nature with a changed perception, I wrote down as a diary of Petra. That's the Ate Petra, in the novel. So this diary is later quoted by the narrator of the novel. So in this way, I could bridge this desire to write with the knowledge that it is actually too early to really go into the whole narrative. And so I actually, like the Hong Kong chapter of Betty Wang, I had to write about 3 times, because after I came home from Hong Kong, I wrote this chapter, or these 2 chapters, and half a year later, I thought it was total crap. It was much too close to the experience. So, and a happy moment, maybe, for example, when I was in Shanghai, these two months, I was invited by the Shanghai Writers Association to a program. And every morning I was going to the park to do Tai Chi. And I was sort of befriended by this Mr. Wang, who wanted to improve his English. So we had a tit for tat. Like first he taught me his Tai Chi, and then I practice English, and I brought him some poems. We talked about these poems. He was a fan of Bob Dylan, and yeah. Anyway, so with him, I learned that there is one figure in Tai Chi that they actually do in the morning routine in the order later. That is a Bai He Liang Se, and Bai He is in English, is Chinese for a certain crane. And in German, I found out that the name of this crane is a nun crane. So like the woman, madre. So I realized that there I had the Chinese Tai Chi and my sort of monastery language coming into like this fortuitous crossings of languages. And I don't know, maybe I'm a bit manic about my projects. And one thing about mania, which can be very scary, is that suddenly you see connections everywhere. So when I was really into this project, I saw orders, monasteries, nuclear waste everywhere, and it was all connected. And I thought, like, why has nobody else written this novel? Because it's out there. And that's the moment that I really love about work. And I think that it's when this feeling is really dense, that's when I think I can start writing.
Okay, I think that was a wonderful answer to my question. Thank you very much.
May isa pang tanong, kung may oras pa, no, Annette. At ito ay, nuclear waste is a global concern, but how do we localize concerns about nuclear waste in the Philippines, where nuclear power is not an option, no? Pero gusto kong lang na sa Taiwan, ano, meron dong mga ang tawag yung mga indigenous people sa Taiwan, they're Austronesians, just like us. And there's an island, a very famous island, the Orchid Island, na yung mga taga ron ay mga nanggaling sa mga Ibatan, no? Galing sa Batanes, ano? And Orchid Island is actually a storage area for nuclear waste of Taiwan. Kaya yun nga, weird dun eh, kawawa sila dahil sila yung mga katutubong mga Austronesians, para sila mga Pilipino, ano? Mga Ifugao, ano? Parang mga taga-Ibatan, ano? Pero yung kanilang lugar, yung kanilang isla ay ginagamit na imbakan ng nuclear waste, ano, ng mga Taiwanese, ano? Pero yung tanong nga rito ay siguro masabing universal ang nuclear waste bilang isang problema. Pero sa Pilipinas ay wala pa naman tayong mga nuclear plants, ano? Naka-moth yung ating Bataan na reactor, no? So paano ito magkakaroon ng kabuluhan sa Pilipinas?
The fact that wala naman ang nuclear power plant, hindi ibig sabihin na walang nuclear waste kasi galing din itong basura sa mga ospital. Kasi yung mga how do you call these machines where you test for cancer or the whole radiography, etc. That is actually producing quite a lot of nuclear waste that has to be stored. And actually, I did start to research a bit what happens to this waste in the Philippines. I didn't get very far.
Totoo yan. Maganda yan. Kasi alam niyo yung tawag dito, yung Arboretum sa UP Diliman. Tatayuan ng PGH, ano, ng Philippine General Hospital. Yung specialization niyan ay nuclear medicine, no? Dahil nga yung parang Nuclear Research Institute ng Pilipinas. So obviously there will be nuclear waste in that facility. So totoo yan, na hindi lang ito problema ito talaga din ng Pilipinas sa ngayon, no? So yun nga, yung Arboretum, yun yung last natural rainforest in Quezon City. Yun ay babawasan pa, tatayuan ng mga ospital, ano, sa ngayon. So ito ay isang campaign issue sa Pilipinas. Yan, so wala na yatang mga tanong. So there's another question from Neil Garcia, ano? And what is this? What is this question? The worldly and ito kay Neil Garcia, ano, Annette? The worldly and the spiritual, a monastery that looks after the welfare of the world by securing it against nuclear contamination. Not entirely strange, given that all religions and the instruments do have a worldly interest, do wish to keep the world safe, sometimes against itself. So it's not really a question, it's a comment, you know? And it sort of backs up your idea about monasteries and protecting the world against nuclear waste, right? So, paubusin natin yung oras. Ano? May oras pa ba tayo natitira? O wala na? So, if we don't have a lot of time, we can give Annette the last word, you know, about her novel. When will the translation come out?
Nagtatrabaho nag-umpisa na magtrabaho ang si Camille Lucia, ang aking yung tagasalin para sa French. My French publisher and the Korean actually have bought the rights for the translation. So there will be a French and the Korean edition. And you know, the system with us is like the rights are with the publisher, so I can maybe try to organize something, but it's basically ang dapat kumikilos ay ang publisher na gustong pumili ng mga rights ng nobela nito. At hindi ko alam kung may English. Siyempre inaasahan ko, pero maganda talaga ang kadanasan ko sa Korea sa nakaroong ikatlong nobela ko.
Daig pa kami ng Koreano, no? Sa katunayan, yung
Oo.
dalawang nobela, yung Wilhelm Tell in Manila, saka ito,
Oo.
patisahin talaga sa Filipino o sa English man lang, ano, para
Oo.
mabasa ng mga Pilipino. Dahil maraming koneksyon sa Pilipinas ang dalawang nobelang ito, ano, makita ito ng mga Pilipino. Kaya lang, mas ito talaga, Annette, napakahirap ng iyong pagsusulat, napakahirap talaga isalin.
O totoo ba? O pero gusto kong magsalamat at pinasalamat po sa inyong lahat. Sobrang saya ako na pwede ako sumama dito. At I will follow the live streams until Saturday. So at least I will see you. So that's good for me. Yes.
So, on behalf of ICW at Tikhaan, no, maraming salamat sa iyo. Pero magpa-present pa sa iyo ng isang certificate. Ano? So, ito, I turn over the program to our friends, ano, to turn over a certificate, to give you your certificate for this very important lecture for our UP National Workshop 60th today. Thank you. Thank you, Annette. Maraming salamat sa iyo.
Salamat po.
Ako bang babasa ito? Okay, so I'll read it.
Oo.
Certificate of Appreciation